Hey everybody, welcome to September 17th MakerDAO community call. We do these calls every Tuesday, and every Tuesday we do two things. Well, one thing always, the second thing sometimes. The first thing we do is we cover the week in MakerDAO. So we go through all the different stuff that's going on in Maker governance, all of the different partnerships, integrations, and grants that have been announced or have been happening over the last week. We go over just a couple of things that have been published on the Maker blog, highlights from the community, interesting articles, notable Reddit threads. And then lastly, we also go through just some of the live events that are happening week to week. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is we've been trying very hard to consistently have interesting guests on the call so that, viewers and, if you're watching at home, you can get some value out of this and maybe be exposed to something you didn't know about in this like ever-growing, impossible to keep up with space. But that's a good thing. So this week we don't have a guest. We almost had Dai on, but Dai, which is a hack from ETH Berlin, they're going to be on potentially on October 1st. So watch out for that. And if you don't know what Dai is, actually, I'm not even going to explain it. You just Google it. Or no, maybe that's mean of me. Geez, how do I explain it? Maybe I could. Well, all right. If you go into the agenda, you can find their dev post. Just Control F LS Dai, and you will find a link to their dev post. I promise you. All right. Anyway, so welcome to the call. Today's probably going to be a short one. There's only like 3 of us in the call, so it's a super intimate, right? But I'm going to go through some of the stuff that's been going on in governance first, since that is probably the most interesting, at least for me, but also the most kind of effectual to the greater ecosystem around DeFi, because MakerDAO very clearly seems to be leading the charge in terms of interest rates. So this week we saw on September 13th on Monday, or was that Monday? No, sorry, September 13th, Friday. Last Friday, there was an executive vote launched to lower the stability fee by 2% down to 12.5%. And by the next day on Saturday, it was passed and executed. So as of Saturday, the stability fee for ETH CDPs is actually 12.5%. And this has been part of a aggressive rate lowering spree that MKR token holders have been on for about the last month. And the reason for that is because for about the last month, the average trading price of Dai has been between $1 and a penny and $1 and 2 pennies. And that just shows a clear, undersupply over demand regime for Dai. And actually, if we, maybe I could actually share my screen, but here's a window that I'm gonna open up for you guys. There's a really great website called dai.decipher.io, and it was, I think it's hosted by our very own community member, Vishesh. And if this thing loads, I will share my screen for a second, but I'll show you guys the how cool this site is. It's basically a 24-hour volume weighted average price of Dai. And it's either my internet or something, but it's not loading too quickly. I'll show it later, but so basically for the last month, Dai has been trading at a premium, and actually in the last couple of days, it's gone down. So the Dai peg has, at least on the 24-hour volume weighted average price, has actually been pretty close exactly to $1. I think it's just like $1.005 or like 0.007 or something is the average right now for the last 24 hours. But nevertheless, it looks like the stability fee decreases have resulted in or have helped it to achieve the desired effect, which is a peg that's right on target. And also with that, this Dai supply actually rose from, we've been coasting at about 78, 77, 76 million for for like the better part of like 2 months almost. We've been around that point, and as a result of these stability fee decreases, we saw at least one very large refinancing of about 3 million Dai from Compound back to MakerDAO. which spiked the Dai supply up to around 84 million. And so, yeah, so that was the executive vote. There was also a governance poll that went live yesterday on the 16th. It ends Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right before the weekly governance and risk call. So, so this week, if you're an MKR token holder, you have the chance to vote for the next stability fee adjustment, basically what's going to be on the executive vote on Friday. And you could vote between a range of 8.5% to 16.5%. So you could lower it, you could raise it, all depending on what you see as right as an Maker token holder. And since the Dai peg seems to be corrected, I'd probably, well, I can't advocate, but I know what I'll be voting for. I'll be voting for just to stay. I think we got to just kind of chill out and see what's going on with the peg after this week. Vishesh makes a really good point. A lot of adjustments might not be an amazing thing, but either way, onward. So with governance, we have a governance at a glance thread. If you guys don't know, if you're interested in governance, our forum at forum.makerdao.com is just thriving with tons of conversations about various topics. Governance at a glance, which is a thread that I link in the agenda that I could actually also link here in the chat for you guys that are here. It basically sums up what's been going on in governance over maybe a slightly broader time frame, maybe about a month, and it shows all the kind of the big things. Well, here, let me actually just read the categories. Oh no, actually, it's the incorrect link. All right, I have to fix the link, but nevertheless, actually, I got you guys. Yeah, this should be it. Cool. Let me know if that link works. Should be 84. 374. Okay, anyway, yeah. So governance at a glance, basically, it gives like a little 3-point summary of the stuff going on in Maker governance. It gives a list of threads about active discussions that are going on that might even have like in-forum sentiment polls. There's also threads linked about seeking consensus. So, oh no, yeah, those are the ones we're pulling for, the seeking consensus. Active discussions are just kind of open discussions. But seeking consensus basically has some in-forum consensus polls to try to determine what at least the community, not necessarily Maker token holders, are feeling about various issues. We also have ongoing initiatives, which are threads basically around like the process of governance, like signaling guidelines, how to coordinate collateral due diligence as a community, systemic risk directory, which is just basically defining and speccing out the various systemic risks, identify, in like the MakerDAO system, and then stuff that's on the horizon, which are kind of more long-standing threads and discussions that we need to figure out as a community for the long run, which actually right now, probably the most important one is the navigation of the transition between single collateral Dai and multi-collateral Dai and setting up the DSR. So yeah, which actually leads me to some of the stuff that came out this week. So, so regarding the DSR, Cyrus, who's part of our interim risk team, actually published a proposal for, I don't think it was a proposal for DSR initial values, but it was just a beginning discussion thread about DSR initial values. And I think I may have covered it in last week's community call because I think he posted it like on Monday or something. Yeah, but there's a lot of conversation about whether the DSR should start at 0, whether it should start at just some percentage rate above 0, how it's going to be, like where is it going to come from? A big part of the DSR, like if you don't, just to catch you up, right? Like the DSR gets paid for out of somebody's pocket. And the premise is that it gets paid out of stability fees. So do Maker holders take the full brunt of the cost, or do they carry that cost over to CDP holders by setting up the stability fee so that it's not just a risk premium on the underlying asset itself, but also basically a DSR component to each one of those. And there's various issues associated with that, and that's the point of the whole discussion. So right now we're having an open discussion as a community about how to set up this DSR rate, which is a really important policy tool for Dai and for Maker moving forward. Besides the DSR values, which I actually need a link in the yeah, I'm going to update the agenda because I actually missed that one. So besides the DSR initial values, we also saw 3 different posts by Nick Kunkel, who is currently our head of backend services and the guy behind Oracles. So he put together a mandate around Oracle teams and 2 different proposals around Oracle incentive restructuring and adding a few public organizations as feeds for the multi-collateral Dai Oracle system. So if you guys haven't been following along, I definitely suggest either watching or checking out the summaries or transcripts of the last 2 governance and risk calls. So the last 2 governance and risk calls had a section on the whole Oracle's V2 blog post that came out a few weeks ago. And basically, as MakerDAO becomes more and more decentralized and as the foundation kind of steps back incrementally to give MakerDAO more and more control over the entire system, Oracles is a part of that. And Oracles have always been meant to kind of be handed over to Maker governance. But with that comes a lot of kind of open questions. For example, who's responsible for the technical oversight of Oracles? Who's responsible for basically everything to do with Oracles? And at the moment, there's a mandate basically proposing that the Maker governance delegate and pay like an Oracle team to basically handle all of these things. And Maker governance can vary. There's basically going to be processes in place to remove Oracle teams, replace Oracle teams, have checks and balances over Oracle teams. So that's one side of it. And then other sides of it are the fact that Oracles right now are actually paid for and subsidized, like the costs of them are subsidized by the foundation itself. In multi-collateral Dai, that will not be the case, or at least maybe in the beginning it will be. But eventually, the MakerDAO system, the protocol, will have to bear the cost of paying for feed providers. It'll have to bear the cost for paying the Oracle team to maintain the infrastructure and like troubleshoot when problems arise, and maybe upgrade if critical upgrades are needed, etc., etc. And so there is a new whitelisting feature that is proposed in Oracle's V2, which is a really great idea in my opinion. But also there's just a lot there. I highly suggest reading up on it. And so also we're going to shift Oracles from being purely, feed providers from being purely pseudonymous individuals to also including public organizations. And that switch is actually game theoretically a lot more resilient than the current system. And so if you actually watch last week's governance call, we dive deeply into those exact questions of why it's actually good to have public organizations using multi-sig wallets to basically manage their own feed provision. Why that's a really good thing in the scheme of like MakerDAO Oracles in general, and Oracles in general, period. Because public organizations kind of have a lot to lose reputationally, where pseudonymous individuals do not. And so having a mix of both is actually a really, really resilient model, in my opinion. But it might not be. And if you disagree, definitely join the conversation and make a case for why you think that's wrong. Because right now everything is up in the air, and we're open to constructive feedback, which is part of the reason I really love Maker. All right, so besides that, in the forums, we saw the first collateral onboarding application. It was submitted by a stablecoin called TUSD. And if you don't know, anybody can actually submit one of these to the public forum. And if there is enough, community consensus, your collateral would be added into the next asset priority poll. And the asset priority poll is a poll that basically happens on a recurring basis. We don't really know how often it happens because this hasn't been too formally defined, but you know, we basically are going to be polling and adding collateral one by one. So if you feel like you have a quality collateral, you could publicly post, and that's exactly what CUSD did. And it actually sparked a big conversation about whether adding stablecoins as collateral makes sense. And so Rune Christensen actually posted a whole introductory thread on why he thinks stablecoins are useful as collateral and to who they're useful as collateral, mainly to market makers. Spoiler alert. But there's a lot of conversation about what the issues with that might be. So very interesting thread if you're interested in whether stablecoins as collateral on multi-collateral DAI makes sense. But nevertheless, really exciting to see the very first collateral onboarding proposal that was like naturally put there by somebody in our ecosystem or in the whole crypto ecosystem generally. So cool. With that, actually, let me see. I wonder if I mentioned it last week. No, I didn't. All right, cool. So, and I actually forgot to write it here, but really cool development. So for new hires, we actually hired a new agile coach, and we also hired a new developer on the integrations team. And the new developer on the integrations team, if you're in the community, you actually might know him. It's C. Mooney. So Chris, I think his name's Chris. Crap, this is recorded. He's gonna kill me. Just kidding. He's not gonna kill me. He's actually a really great dude. Hold on, let me just make sure. Yeah, where is it? Yeah, Chris. Yeah, cool. So I wasn't completely out of my mind. So yeah, so Chris is joining us, C Money or Mooney, on our integrations team. So that's really exciting. And then we also hired a gentleman by the name of Robert Jordan from Colorado, and he's coming on board as an agile coach, so helping us with a lot of our internal processes on the engineering side. So constantly improving, constantly bettering ourselves, always great to see that. All right, cool. So that's it for new hires. For partnerships, integrate, and by the way, feel free to interrupt me if you guys want me to like go deeper into anything. But partnerships, integrations, and grants, we saw Staked launching a robo advisor for yield, and the only reason they're on here is because they support Dai from the offset. So that's really cool to see. The Staked robo advisor is like this really cool thing that basically puts your deposits in the highest earning lending protocol and like rebalances. And actually Cole is here. So Cole, do you know what's the conditions of the rebalancing? Is it that it rebalances like on a time basis, or it rebalances like when it automatically sees a rate, a better rate? How does it work? Also, you're muted if you are talking.
Hey guys, so yeah, an off-chain oracle monitors the yields across protocols and calculates the optimal asset allocation every 30 minutes. So that's currently how that's working. But I mean, if there's kind of a frequency that gets that is optimal, and it can always be implemented. So that's something we're carefully watching and thinking about. But thanks for the shout out, David. It's really exciting to be helping people maximize their DAI, and yeah, I mean we're excited to be in the DeFi ecosystem.
Oh yeah, sweet. And actually, while you're here, do you know what the next steps for you guys are? Like, what's the V2? What's the next addition to this thing?
Sure. So we should be publishing a roadmap shortly, and we'll be just publishing stuff from our Zendesk and just our blog. So nice. I guess I'll kind of punt on that one, but I'm sure we'll share more details soon. So.
Right on. Sweet. Cool. All right, cool. So besides Staked, we also saw Yeah, no problem, Cole. So yeah, besides stake, there's also this one other integration that I saw, which is that Dai is now available on Litex store, so litex.store, and this is I think it's a Chinese online retailer. Maybe it's not a retailer, but you could basically use Dai to pay for mobile, gas bills seamlessly. So that's pretty cool, seeing Dai get adopted in China a little bit more and a little bit more. So yeah, that's about it for partnerships, integrations, grants for this week. Not too much. Didn't see any podcasts or interviews that at least popped on my radar, but if you know any, send them my way. The Maker blog did post a couple of interesting pieces. So the first one was an update on the Dai savings rate in multi-collateral Dai, and this basically just shared with the community a bit more documentation about DSR, a bit more detail about DSR, even a little bit of a sneak peek into the user interface of what the DSR page might look like. Governance and risk around DSR. I basically covered a bunch of like topics around DSR succinctly and kind of in an introductory way. And then the other Maker blog post was that the Maker Foundation Community Grants Program, well, I'm just going to read the title straight up instead of making up my own title. Maker Foundation Community Grants provide funding for blockchain projects. So, and this was to highlight our internal grants program, which is actually in community development. And it's mostly run by Rich, who is a wonderful, wonderful dude in our org. And we gave out slightly under $1 million Dai to, what was it? I think, what was the number? Yeah, so we allocated over 600,000 Dai for development grants and about 100,000 Dai spread across the rest of our like smaller initiatives. So here's the numbers. So out of 83 submitted grant applications, we funded 28 of them. Among them were companies like Sablier, like Pool Together. There was a bunch of others, which I don't think all of them are public, but nevertheless, I think we're going to be releasing some more info on the ones that have been granted. But regardless of that, a lot of it went to these bigger grants, but also we have granted around 100,000 Dai across other initiatives, which include things like the translations, the Community Translation Initiative, which we use to translate all of the single collateral Dai FAQs to I think like 7 different languages, or at least most of them. It was resulting in like 35 different documents across 7 languages. It was really, really cool, and it happened all in a really short period of time. But besides that, we also have a community meetup micro grant program, which I think we gave out something like 3,000 to 5,000 Dai over the last few months to fund organic meetups all over the world. And also we have been like doing these kind of offshoot just grants to people in our community who are doing good work. So yeah, we've been working hard to incentivize our ecosystem to continue to be compensated fairly and put out good work and do cool stuff, which is what we love to see. So yeah, that's about it for the Maker blog. And then the last 2 sections I'm going to cover are highlights from the community and then real life events. So highlights from the community, this actually just came out today, but the compound vote ended, and MKR is going to be one of the next assets to be made into a money market basically on Compound. So that's exciting and slightly terrifying, but nevertheless, and if you're wondering why I'm saying slightly terrifying, it's because MKR is a governance token, and if you're able to lend out a governance token and somebody is able to borrow it, even borrow it for like an hour, that opens up the risk to governance attacks. So it's going to be really interesting seeing how much MKR is going to be available to borrow, and how MKR token holders are going to be whether or not they're going to be actually cognizant of this risk and whether or not they're going to treat their holdings with that in mind. Like, I'd be really surprised to see people with MKR holdings lend out the full amount of them, because that's kind of like they're shooting themselves in the foot. Like, if somebody uses your own MKR to, like, you know, to help in a governance attack and it succeeds, and MKR like drops in value like crazy, like you basically shot yourself in the foot by lending it out in the first place. So something that's been suggested in the community is like things like, you know, just as a personal heuristic, like don't ever lend out like more than a third of your MKR, you know, just so that if somebody actually uses it for like a malicious vote, you yourself can actually combat it. And then also leave yourself a bit of margin for those that do lend out all of their Maker. Things like that. But nevertheless, dark DAOs, governance attacks, all of that stuff is a reality. It's a real risk, and it's interesting to see what's going to come of this. So yeah, and so cool. And then also there was an announcement. It was kind of a call out from our team to the community. So if you're integrating with a Kovan multi-collateral Dai in a public test deployment of your app, we want to hear from you. So email integrate@makerdao.com before October to discuss some upcoming opportunities with us. So for the next 2 weeks, if you're doing that, if you're a DApp out there and you're a developer and you're listening, shoot an email over to integrate@makerdao.com and get in touch with us. So, all right, cool. Articles. So last week I didn't have enough time to go through the articles that I had featured, so I'll start with last week's articles and then this week's articles. But last week there was a analysis on MakerDAO CDP liquidation. It was very comprehensive. It was had a lot of numbers and math. So for those of you that enjoy that, like me, definitely check it out. There was also an article called Synthetic Assets in DeFi, Use Cases and Opportunity. And this was really neat because DeFi Prime, who published the blog, they actually included a lot of these like visual graphics that were very helpful in understanding the models of different synthetics providers. So there's different ways you could do synthetic assets. And so that article did pretty well to cover them. And then the third article I highlighted from last week was MakerDAO is helping 60 kids in Brazil learn the basics of blockchain. And this is actually pretty cool. So we granted a bunch of money to this to Blockchain Academy Mexico, I think, or Brazil. Sorry, yeah, silly. Yeah, Blockchain Academy Brazil, and we're helping them the students there do a conceptual hackathon as their kind of like final project. So obviously, like half a semester to learn about blockchain and computer science and all that stuff is not enough to make you a coder. So you can't actually do like a hackathon. Maybe you can, but the idea is we're helping them do kind of like a conceptual hackathon. So spec out your idea, and like basically some of the judges, or at least my understanding is that representatives from the World Bank are going to be judging this conceptual hackathon, and that this whole thing is pretty cool. So and this is kind of a pilot project. So if it works out, we're gonna continue to support and continue to try to educate people about blockchain. And especially young people in emerging economies that want these kinds of skills and that could find the most utility out of this tech. All right, cool. So this week there was actually a few really cool articles as well. So Lisa J.Y. Tan wrote an independent research piece on the economics of MakerDAO. It's like a 20-page paper, and she's asking for feedback. So I linked it in the agenda. I think if you look up her name, Lisa J.Y. Tan on Twitter, you could also find the paper there. She posted it on a recent tweet, I think on the 16th of September. So yeah, check that out. The next article is addressing popular MakerDAO criticisms. And this one was actually kind of a really fun one for me to read, because it was basically Matteo Leibowitz, who is a really, really great mind in the world of DeFi and crypto in general and Ethereum in general. So he actually took Preston Bryan's top like 5 or 6 criticisms and like broke them down and rebutted them, which is really nice to see, because Preston Bryan makes a lot of noise, and like makes a lot of kind of blanket criticisms, and doesn't respond to when people rebuttal him with like, you know, actual like rational, reasonable rebuttals. So Mateo Leibowitz did it in a article on the block, which, you know, gives a lot more credibility to like the fact that there are real answers to his like criticisms. So it's nice to see people kind of wising up and being reasonable about their reasoning for MakerDAO. And then the third article was by was by Kyle, who is the co-founder and I think CVO of BZX, also known as Fulcrum. So he did a really, really awesome piece called A Tour of the Varieties of Dai. And if you've been in the space for the last 3 months, you'll know that basically every hackathon there's like there's like 3 new Dais. Like every month there's one really cool new Dai. And what I mean by that is like, you know, it started off with like regular Dai, and then we saw last year the invention of X Dai, which was basically Dai that lived on a bridge with a side chain, and allowed people to have really fast transactions, and like it was great. Like everybody at ETH Denver last year paid for their food with XDAI. And then we saw R Dai and C Dai and I Dai. And I was trying to get a guest on the show today, or on the community call today for LS Dai. There's Idle Dai, Swan Dai, Aztec Notes, ZK Dai, Pool Dai, A Dai, NM Dai, WX Dai, Y Dai. Well, Y Dai is Yield Dai, right? Dan Robinson's thing, Meta Dai, Max Dai. There's just so many Dais, and it speaks to this this really cool flourishing of developer activity around Dai, and around the fact that it's so flexible. You could do so much with it when it involves, you know, revenue streams from money markets or like privacy or like literally anything. It's programmable money, and it seems to be the manifestation of this vision of programmable money, and it's so exciting to see this this flourishing of varieties of Dai. So Kyle did a really great job in basically explaining it, explaining all the various types, or at least the most popular ones. Because I guarantee you, for every one you see, there's probably like 3 you don't. But anyway, cool. So some notable Reddit threads, and this is the last section before real life events. So there was one, oh yeah, that's right. So Rune has been kind of like somewhat absent in the community for the last few months. Nobody really knew why, but he posted on Reddit kind of explaining why. So Rune had a kid, and super happy for him about that. And he posted a picture on Reddit, and it was pretty sweet. And the comments there are just pure gold. So yeah, check out that thread. That was a good thread. And then another one that I want to address is that a lot of people this week were having issues with Coinbase's CDP tutorial. And the issue is that basically Coinbase did not put enough of a gas limit on default for their tutorial. So a lot of people's transactions were failing and they were unable to complete it. And then even after completing it, they were having issues because of basically network congestion. So yeah, there's one Reddit thread that I linked in the agenda that basically actually solves the issue for anybody. So it'll help you figure out how to fix it, how to deal with the congested network. So check it out there if you're a listener and you had the same issue. All right, cool. And then last week there was a couple threads that I didn't cover. There was an ETH Finance AMA series with MakerDAO where you know, a few people from our team, like Cyrus Unesi, Mariano Conti, Chris Bradbury, there was a few others that basically interacted with the ETH Finance community and talked about a lot about MakerDAO and answered a bunch of questions. So there's a link in the agenda if you're interested in those. I thought it was a great AMA, and actually I think we should do more AMAs. I think AMAs are underutilized and really helpful if they're done well. So cool. And then the second thread from last week highlights, the title is Dai is approaching $1.02, showing the resolve of Maker holders to raise the stability fee when it was at 96 cents. Oh, sorry, hold on. Dai is approaching $1.02 dash, showing the resolve of MKR holders to raise the stability fee when it was 96 cents. It was a painful but important success. Yeah, so the title isn't clear, but basically in the text of the thread, it also comments about how, hey, you know, like now that we're trading at a premium and MKR holders are aggressively actually lowering the rate, it shows that the original criticism of MKR holders just being greedy, raising the rates, was kind of like a nonsense criticism, because, you know, very clearly MKR holders are aggressively lowering the rates in the interest of the monetary policy of Dai, the Dai peg, which was our argument from the beginning. Like, hey, we're not raising rates just to raise rates. We're raising them because we need to raise them. The market is demanding we raise them because Dai is trading at a discount, and we need to make Dai more expensive to create, to basically fix this. And it worked. And now it's the opposite direction. Dai's trading at a premium, which means there's not enough supply, which means we need to make Dai cheaper to create. And so our stability fee is dropping, and it's solving the issue. So for those in the space that kind of were uncomfortable or like didn't really understand like the mechanics, or like weren't trusting of the efficacy of like stability fee changes to help with the Dai peg, that thread just basically says, hey, like, it's really nice to see MKR holders actually caring about monetary policy and not just about the stability fee for profit's sake, which was never the case in any of the conversations I've ever had with any MKR token holders. It's always been about the peg, but nevertheless, hopefully this dispels that kind of criticism in the future. Cool. So lastly, just finishing up some real life events. Today in Copenhagen, one of our team members from the integrations team, Nikolai, is doing a talk at Demo Day Blockchain at Copenhagen FinTech. So if you're in Copenhagen, there's an Eventbrite link, check it out. Tomorrow in Copenhagen as well, Lasse, who is our head of integrations, is going to be at the Tech Barbecue. So you can visit techbbq.dk for more details. And then on the 19th in Berlin, we got Gustav from our business development team speaking, doing a keynote at Finance 3.0, creating an open financial ecosystem. Also on the 19th in Ljubljana, which I think is in Slovenia or Slovakia. God, I'm so geographically ignorant. It's horrible. Yeah, Slovenia. Yeah, it's the capital of Slovenia. So Petru, who's also one of the devs on our team, awesome dude, he's going to be speaking at DeFi Trustless FinTech Meetup. And then on the 24th in London, we got Chris Bradbury speaking at NABU Presents Crypto Mass Adoption with basically, yeah, just another crypto meetup. And then the biggest event of all, that's not this week, but it's coming, is DevCon 5 in Osaka. And basically all of MakerDAO will be there, all like 90-something of us. So we are going to be at DevCon, so stay tuned. And we're going to be planning stuff for it, like hopefully a Dappy Hour. It's really hard to plan a Dappy Hour in Japan, let me tell you. Yeah, there's going to be some cool stuff happening that week, so stay tuned for that. And with that, that pretty much covers my entire agenda. And so I'm going to open up to you guys, the four of you that have made this call. If you guys want to talk about anything or ask questions or kind of, yeah, it's up to you guys. But I'm content to end the call a bit early if you guys are. All right, sweet. I'll take the silence as a implicit nod of the head to end the call a bit early. So again, thank you guys for coming on the call. Sorry, it was a bit of a monologue. That's why we like to have guests. So if you guys have any interesting guests, push them forward to me. I'm always looking to have them on the call. So thank you all.
Later, guys.
Sweet, later.
Have a good one.